You guys have no idea how many takes of this doggone video I've done. Hi everybody! I'm Kit Kat Beignet. For those of you who don't know me, you can call me Kit Kat, Kat, Beignet, whatever's to your liking. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. We're always happy to have you here. Well, it's just me unless there's somebody else in here with me. Either way, thank you so much for tuning in. I really enjoy doing these videos and having these kinds of discussions with everybody, even if it's sometimes just one person, but I like doing it anyway. Today, I wanted to talk about something that's a bit of a touchy topic. And I worked on this so many times. I'm so sorry, you guys, because I really tried to make this video last week. And to be honest, a lot of things happened last week that I didn't expect. Some good, some meh, some not so great. And when I tried to sit down and record this video, it just wasn't coming off right. So I just decided not to post that video, and I took a little break and a breather, let this week go by, and now here I am, after another 5 tries, recording this video and hopefully posting it now, as you should see. So as the title says, we're going to be talking about being somebody who's not normal enough to be with the normal crew, but not weird enough to fit in with the weird crew either. I don't know if any of you have experienced being like this or feeling like you're in this kind of mid-ground between normalcy and weirdness, but I sure feel that way. Now I don't have as much of a problem with it, but upon my journey from one end to the other, I did feel a bit weird about it. Funnily enough, but So to start from the very beginning, because I can only frame things through story times. I don't know any other way. As a kid, looking back now, I know I was strange as flip. I did a lot of weird things as a child, really up until I was in high school. Of course, when you're a kid, you do a lot more really off-the-wall things than you do when you're older, but I can comfortably admit now that I was a quirky little somebody. And, you know, it's okay. I'm content with it now. Like, I've accepted what I was, and I accept what I am now. But getting through it was one heck of a journey, I will tell you that. So I didn't really understand that I was weird when I was younger up until middle school. I knew that I did some really off things because, you know, people would look at me some type of way, but oftentimes I didn't care. I just did what I did, and I went about my business and let people go about their business. Of course, like most of us, I experienced bullying growing up, as well as ostracization from my peers in school. However, things really didn't click up until my last year of middle school. And that was when I was cornered by 2 of my friends, or my supposed friends, in my friend group that I had been friends with for all 3 years of middle school, 6th grade to 8th grade up to this point. And they had said in so many words, I can't say verbatim because I don't recall, but they said something to the effect of me being annoying, or they were tired of me following them around, or I was really weird. Pretty much all that. And of course, me being the sensitive bug I am, I took this to heart. And you know, when I usually would kind of brush off comments like this and completely ignore it, I think this really hit home for me because, you know, these are my friends. I thought they were my friends. And when you hear something like this, that, you know, usually people that don't like you or people that bully you tell you this, you know, you expect that and you take it with a grain of salt. Even though it hurts, it's just like, you already know they don't care for you. But when it comes from somebody you thought was a friend, it stings in a bit of a different way, and you start to take it a little more seriously. Like, you take it as them just telling you this because it is what you are, not just because they don't really care for you or don't like you. And with them not having said this up until this point, I think that kind of rubbed in him a bit deeper, because it's like, you have been just tolerating me this whole time without letting me know how trash I was? Dang, that's rough. Like, you could have told me that you didn't like me from jump, but it took you 2-3 years. And I think that was the point where I truly understood how strange I was, but of course it wasn't really a positive connotation. It was more in a negative way. So I tried to distance myself from that come high school. I was still interested in a lot of the things I was interested in as a youngin', be it, anime, geeky stuff, But I kind of kept it under the radar, and I really tried to do my best to fit in what I thought was the in crowd in my first high school. That was a whole nother load of malarkey, but we don't need to get into that because that was a whole different experience. But after coming away from that school, I didn't really feel settled in who I had become, and I didn't really feel so solid in myself. And of course, I was also going through another transition because by sophomore year, I moved to another school. This school was much different from this first school. The school that I transferred into sophomore year was, for lack of a better term, a school for nerds. You had to test to get in. I don't know how the heck I got in, but I ended up there. And of course, when I was first introduced to the environment, I was like, oh, dang, I do not fit in here because these are the nerdiest of nerds. I mean, they know their math. I don't know math. I don't know science. But either way, it was a different environment. And upon being dragged into a friend group by one of my best friends still to this day, I started to kind of get this understanding like, oh, maybe this is a place for me. Maybe I am meshing with people here. People are kind of like me. And they were. By the time that, my friend group fully established, I was surrounded by a bunch of geeky, quirky, nerdy people like myself. And I didn't really feel the need to shun or shy away from the things that I really enjoyed before getting into my first high school. And at this time, I really had a more positive connection to what weirdness was or is. And I started to embrace my quirkiness because, everybody else was doing it, so why not me? And I think even with the struggles I had during this time, I was still solid in who I was as a person. I was solid with the friend group that I had. And everything was considerably good in my social life compared to, the years before. And of course, I stuck with this friend group all throughout the rest of high school, and it was great. Still my solid group of friends to this day. But of course, you can't stay in high school forever. We all eventually went to college. We went our separate ways in different states, different spaces. And that offered up another transition, and I had to face yet again the struggle between normalcy and weirdness. I went to an HBCU, and HBCUs are cool and dandy. In my case, I didn't really have the best experience because, as you can see, I am a very quirky person. I'm a very quirky Black person at that. And sometimes when you mix quirky and Black together, that's often a bit disconcerting in certain Black environments. And that's not to say there weren't other people like me there. There sure were. I did meet people, but in my particular program, we were a bit few and far between. I think I was probably the only one to start off there as a person like myself who was kind of introverted, also kind of into really strange things according to a normal person's perspective. I say normal, but you know what I mean. And I had a really hard time adjusting. And to be frank, I never really quite adjusted like I wanted to, but I eventually got more comfortable in the space as time went on. But initially getting into college, I had a hard time making friends. I had a hard time really connecting with people. Speaking with people, you know, after the fact, after we graduated. A lot of them said that they thought I was stuck up or standoffish because I usually kept to myself, or I just gave off this weird vibe or something. But then eventually they said they later understood it was because I was, one, very strange. And they didn't mean it in a demeaning way, but they understood that I was a really quirky person at the end of the day. And, you know, they understood I was introverted after some point. And they also understood that I had some weird social hang-ups that probably contributed to me looking like I did not want to interact with people. And they weren't completely wrong. I didn't want to interact with people because when I did, I felt like it pushed people away because they're like, ooh, okay, you're a little, you're a little weird, huh? And that actually happened. I was talking to this dude, not talking, I was just friendly talking. I think he was trying to get fresh, but either way, we were having a conversation. And the more he talked to me, the more he looked a little, And then at some point he said, "You're one of those, aren't you?" And I didn't even have to question what one of those was. Because one, at this point, I was wearing a crocheted hat of Iron Man, as well as a Marvel t-shirt, so that was probably a dead giveaway of what he was talking about, but also I think the more he talked to me, the more it was like, oh, here are all the quirky things being word vomited into your face. And oftentimes I got a lot of reactions like that, just not as direct. So during college, especially at some point, I really wanted, or was really looking for a group that was just like my friend group back in high school. And at this point, I was getting more interested in things like Lolita fashion and cosplay. Although at the time I wasn't doing cosplay, or I still don't really do Lolita fashion, but I wanted to do it. But of course I had no idea where to begin and I was just lost. So I was just spending most of my time on Tumblr, scrolling through people's blogs and whatnot just to get some inspiration because I was living vicariously through them. But of course, in spending more time online and trying to reconnect or connect with people who I felt might be more accepting of me as I am, I really started to, of course, yearn for reestablishing something like the friend group I had back then. And this, of course, made me search for different activities, different groups to be a part of. And I did have contact with a lot of the friends that I had, you know, in high school and whatnot. But of course, you know, they're all doing their own thing. But I got reconnected with somebody who was still in the high school, but who was, you know, part of a group that did stuff for an anime convention. And I had been to this convention before just as a spectator. But, you know, I was like, oh, they're doing things that I really want to do. And she's introducing me to it. So this looks like my ticket to what I want, because I'm missing it in my own personal college space. And so I took that opportunity to, you know, become a part of this group. And I think everybody in this group was really cool. I still am in touch with some of them to this day. But I think the general vibe, even though it was really nice and most of them are very welcoming, I didn't feel quite as accepted. And that's not to say that they were rude or anything, because they were all generally nice. But I did feel a bit of a distance between us. And eventually there were reasons that kind of further exacerbated that kind of feeling. But initially, I kind of started to understand that I feel like I'm not exactly like these people, and I'm not as into the things they're into. And it's not to say that I wasn't into it, but I wasn't into it with as much fervor. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you're into something that much, by all means, go to the moon with it. But for me, it was just not hitting the same way. Even though I really tried. I really tried to get into it like they did. Because the thing is, I wanted to do what they did, but I just didn't want it to do at the same level. And I think that created a bit of a rift. Maybe not in the sense where everybody could feel it, but I just felt it. I personally can't speak for them on how they personally felt about me, but even though I respected all of these people, I just felt like I wasn't really up to their speed. And because I wasn't up to their speed, there wasn't really a way for me to connect with them like I wanted to. So that's kind of a point where I began to understand that I wasn't weird enough. And maybe it's not that I wasn't weird enough, but it is kind of that I wasn't weird enough, because these are what were considered as really weird things in the normal world. Let's just put it that way, because I don't want to call these people weird. They're really great people, but we're just speaking in terms of interests and whatnot. And of course, during this time, I was exploring more, online activity via YouTube, Tumblr, Discord, whatnot. And I started discovering this massive world of nerd culture and geek culture. And the more I tried to immerse myself in it, just like with this group, I kind of started to understand that maybe I'm not as into this as I initially thought. Even though I'm still very interested in a lot of what it has to offer, I'm not into it into a point to where I am willing it to make it my life. Like, I want it to be a part of my life, but I can't make this be the thing that defines me as a person. And I don't necessarily think that's what everyone was doing, because, everybody else had their own things and they were doing a plethora of different things in general. But I did kind of feel like a lot of people just in the space in general, in the nerd geek space, a lot of them are very gung-ho about their interests. And sometimes it can be up to an unhealthy point. And I think the more time I spent online especially, I started to understand how unhealthy that could be. One, because if you're familiar with any nerd spaces, especially anime spaces, the vitriol in those environments can get really, really bad, depending on the circumstances. And we don't need to get into that too much, but what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these people have the tendency to be what we call terminally online. And as a person who used to be very terminally online, I understand what it's like to be in that space. I don't want to criticize anybody, but coming out of it, I did come to realize that that wasn't really a great space to be in, not only because it wasn't really great for my mental health, but also it wasn't really great in general for forming me as a person, because you tend to excuse a lot of poor behavior when you're in these spaces, like when you're deep in these spaces. And not all the time. Like sometimes you'll be like, ooh, you went a little too far, when they get a little too deep with the edgelord humor and whatnot. But I found upon stepping out, perhaps there is some merit to people saying, touch grass. Because the more time I spent outside trying to interact with, different types of people, not just people exactly like me, I've started to really have a more settled feeling in myself overall. So that thing that I was searching for in high school, it didn't really turn out to be me just fully embracing weirdness. It was the fact that I was comfortable with being me because people accepted me for being me. They didn't accept me for performing a certain way that they found acceptable for whatever we were all collectively into. And I think that took some time to understand because I really just thought, it was like, oh, I found weird people, we're all weird, and we're all sitting in our weird, and it's great. And I think part of it was that, like, we were all very quirky kids back in high school, but we did also participate in a lot of other things besides the stereotypical weird stuff. Like, one of my friends played soccer, another friend really liked working with animals, another friend really liked doing other bio stuff. I can't really recall, but you see what I mean. Like, everybody had a variety of interests in this friend group. And even though they were gung-ho somewhat about the weird stuff, they still were well-rounded people. Like, they really didn't just wrap their identity into one thing. And I think I didn't really understand that was happening until I got to the holistically weirder side of things, where people were just like, you're weird, you must be weird, you have to follow by the weird rules, and if you don't, you're not weird enough and we can't accept you, blah, blah, blah. And it's not exactly like it was always like that, but that was kind of just the general feel that I got from spending time in these spaces. So I think all in all, what I hope you get from this is that you don't need to perform a certain way or be a certain way for people to accept you. You shouldn't have to do that. And don't do it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really serve you or anyone around you. And like I said, I don't want this to be distasteful to people who are considered super normal or super weird. You know, if you're in those spaces and you're on either end fully, you know, do that. That's perfectly fine. But if I have anything to say to people like this, please try to be a little more accepting of people who straddle the middle because, you know, because we're just as human as the rest of you guys. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just people looking for a space to be accepted and welcomed into. We're just looking for a place to land, even if that means it's multiple places. And for my people who are in this space, like I said, do you. At the end of the day, that's going to be the most important thing. And this honestly feels like the conclusion of my last video, just in a different circumstance. And when you're doing you, be mindful of how you're doing you, I guess. Because oftentimes when we're on that journey, we tend to let things slide down paths that are not so beneficial to our growth as people. And you know, like I said, it's a journey, but sometimes you gotta learn how to be mindful through that journey. So if you're a person who straddles the middle, who is experiencing your weird out right now, I love that for you. Do it. But also, please go outside. It's very good for your health. And it's really good to interact with other people too, because you become a little more well-rounded. And I think it just helps you become a little more solidified in who you are and who you want to be. And it makes you seek less for validation from anyone because you are secure in yourself. And that's honestly the most important thing. So that's what I hope you get away from this video. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I probably did a bit, but I hope the point generally got across. So again, let me know how you feel about this in the comments below. Let me know if you've experienced this kind of feeling, or if you are a person that straddles the middle, or if you're a person on either end of the spectrum, or whatever in between. Just let me know how you feel. And I'll try to respond if I can. But either way, thank you again for tuning into this video. I will probably be making more stuff soon. I will try to be a bit more timely this time. But either way, thanks again. And until next time, see ya!